A poor woman was trying to leave quietly, but the single father noticed her little daughter staring at the display of teddy bears. Marina stood by the supermarket exit, holding her 6-year-old daughter Alenka's hand. The girl, her lips pressed tightly together, couldn't tear her eyes away from the toy department window, where a huge teddy bear with a red scarf sat right by the glass. Its kind eyes seemed to beckon her to come closer, to touch its soft fur and hug it tight. "Mom," Alenka whispered, "can I just look for a little bit?" Marina forced a weak smile, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "Of course, sunshine, but not for long. Okay, we need to get home." She knew they didn't even have money for bread for the next day, let alone for a toy. After her husband's death, he had died on a construction site 3 years ago. Life had turned into an endless struggle for survival. Her small salary, as a cleaner in the supermarket, was almost entirely spent on rent for their tiny room and food. Alenka quietly approached the glass. Her reflection merged with the image of the bear. In her eyes, one could see not a spoiled desire, but a quiet childhood dream to hold something warm in her own. At that moment, a man with a boy emerged from the next aisle. The man was tall, well-dressed, but his eyes were tired, like those of someone who had been through too much. His son, about 8 years old, was holding a box with a puzzle and saying, "Dad, can I also get a car?" "Well, please, Danya," the father replied softly. "You already have 3 like that at home. Maybe next time." "Okay." The boy pouted but obediently nodded. They headed for the checkout, but the man, Pavel, suddenly noticed the girl by the window. Her gaze was all too familiar. He had seen such eyes in his own son when, after his mother's death, he had been silent for a long time and cried at night. Marina, noticing someone watching, averted her eyes, trying to leave quickly. But Alenka didn't move. "Mom, he's looking," the girl said quietly. "Let's go, sweetie." Marina pulled her by the hand. "It's time." Pavel saw how the woman adjusted the girl's old jacket with a worn-out sleeve and walked towards the exit, trying not to look around. And then he felt something, not pity, but a strange inner warmth, as if fate had given him a sign. He quickly approached the cashier and said, "Miss, can I buy that plush toy, the teddy bear in the window? And please, don't say who bought it. Just tell the girl that she won a gift from the store." The cashier raised her eyebrows in surprise, but, seeing his serious look, just nodded. Marina and her daughter were already leaving when the saleswoman called out to them. "Miss, wait! We have a promotion today. The toy of the day goes to a random visitor." Alenka froze. "Really?" Her eyes widened. "Of course, it's true." The cashier smiled and handed the girl the huge bear. The girl squealed with joy, hugging the toy as if it were a living creature. "Mommy, he's mine! Look, he's mine now!" Marina didn't understand what was happening, but she smiled, feeling her eyes fill with tears. "Thank you so much," she whispered. Pavel, standing nearby, quietly watched them, pretending to look at the storefront. When Marina and her daughter left, he took his son's hand and said, "You see, Danya, sometimes happiness comes to those who simply know how to dream." "Dad, did you buy that gift?" the boy guessed. Pavel smiled. "What do you think?" "I think yes." Danya nodded. "Mom would be proud of you." Those words struck Pavel to the core. After his wife's death, he had tried not to show his son the pain, but now he understood. This is what it was all for. For such small moments of kindness. Several weeks passed. The winter in the Moscow region was harsh, but in Marina's small room, there was a soft light from a desk lamp and from the huge plush bear sitting by Alenka's bed. The girl talked to it every evening, telling it about kindergarten, about her mom, about her dreams. Marina didn't know how she managed to get a full-time position at the same supermarket. Perhaps the manager had taken pity on the single mother. But now they could at least afford something more than just bread and pasta. One evening, there was a knock at the door. On the doorstep stood Pavel, holding a bag of groceries and a small bouquet of daisies. "Hello," he said, slightly embarrassed. "Sorry for coming uninvited. I recognized you. We met at the supermarket." Marina looked at him warily, but there was neither pity nor arrogance in the man's eyes, only kindness. "Yes, I think I remember," she replied cautiously. "You were with your son?" "Right, Danya," Pavel smiled. "He still talks about your daughter. He says she has the kindest eyes in the world." Marina lowered her eyes, not knowing what to say. "We live nearby," Pavel continued. "I thought maybe you'd let us come in. I have some hot soup, and it would be more fun for the kids together." Marina hesitated, but when Alenka peeked out from behind her back and saw the boy with a bag of candies, her face lit up with a smile. "Mom, can they?" she asked quietly. And Marina, for the first time in a long time, simply said, "Yes." From that evening, their quiet miracle began. The children quickly became friends. Alenka shared her pencils, Danya showed her his toys. Pavel and Marina sat in the kitchen, drinking tea and talking. He told her how, after his wife's death, he had almost given up on everything, but his son had forced him to keep living. She talked about how hard it was to be alone and not lose faith in goodness. Pavel offered to help Marina get a job at his company. He owned a small construction firm, and there was always a place for honest people. "No, I can't accept such gifts," Marina refused immediately. "This isn't a gift," he said softly. "It's a chance. And you've earned a chance." A week later, she started her new job. On her first day, when she received her uniform and pass, she almost cried from gratitude and from the feeling that fate had suddenly stopped being her enemy. Pavel would sometimes come over in the evening, sometimes to help with paperwork, sometimes just to fix an outlet. But most importantly, he brought a sense of calm with him. Alenka got used to calling him Uncle Pasha, and every morning she would wave to him as he left for work. In the spring, when the snow had melted and the yard was filled with the smell of wet earth, Pavel invited them to the park. Danya rode his scooter, Alenka swung on the swings, and Marina stood nearby, laughing without a trace of fatigue for the first time in a long time. "You know," Pavel said, "sometimes one chance meeting changes everything." "Maybe," she replied quietly, "but I'm still afraid to believe this is for good." He looked at her seriously. "And I'm not afraid, because now I'm not alone." She didn't answer, just looked towards where their children were playing together and smiled. A year passed. Now they lived together in a small but cozy apartment. In the mornings, Pavel got the kids ready for school and kindergarten, and Marina cooked porridge and laughed, watching them argue over who would hug the bear first before leaving. The plush bear still stood by the window. For them, it was a symbol of the day when one person's kindness changed several destinies at once. Sometimes in the evenings, Marina would ask, "Pasha, why did you do it then? Why did you buy that toy?" He would smile, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Because I saw your daughter's eyes, and I understood that you can't pass by goodness, even if it seems like a small thing. Life is built from such small things." She would lean against him, feeling her heart fill with warmth. And Alenka, now a little older, would whisper to her bear every night before bed, "Thank you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have met our Pasha." And the bear seemed to smile back. One summer, for Alenka's birthday, Pavel organized a party in the yard. There were balloons, a cake, neighbors, and children. Everyone was laughing and having fun. When it was time for gifts, Pavel handed Alenka a box. Inside was another bear, smaller, but exactly like the first one. Now you'll have a friend for your friend, he said. Alenka laughed and exclaimed, That means we're a big family now. Pavel and Marina glanced at each other and, without saying a word, nodded, because that's exactly what they were. A family created not from blood or chance, but from kindness. And somewhere deep in her soul, Marina understood that sometimes miracles happen when you've already stopped believing in them. The most important thing is not to stop being kind, because kindness always returns. Another year passed. Marina and Pavel's life gradually settled into a quiet, steady rhythm. Now they managed the household together, sharing worries, joys, and difficulties. Pavel still worked a lot, but he no longer returned home to an empty house as he once had. He was greeted by laughter, the smell of dinner, and two children's voices arguing over who gets to show their drawing first, or who gets to tell about their day. Alenka and Danya became inseparable. They went to the same school, sat at the same desk, and protected each other. The teachers were amazed at how strong a friendship could be when children grow up in an atmosphere of love and mutual care. Marina, working in Pavel's office, proved to be a responsible and attentive employee. Her colleagues respected her, and Pavel increasingly found himself thinking that without her, not only his home, but also his work would lose its meaning. One evening, when the children were already asleep, he walked into the kitchen where Marina was washing dishes. The lamplight fell softly on her face. Pavel stood in the doorway, watching her, just as he had in the supermarket when he first saw her daughter looking into the window. "You're lost in thought again?" Marina said without turning around. "Did something happen?" He came closer and quietly hugged her from behind. "I'm just thinking how strangely everything turned out. One random day, and everything changed." She smiled. "It's fate. Sometimes it reveals itself not loudly, but in small things. In a smile, in a glance, in a soft plush bear. In you," he added quietly. "You are this fate." She became embarrassed and lowered her eyes. "Don't say that, Pasha. We're just people. We were all just trying to survive." "No, Marina," he said seriously. "You weren't just surviving. You didn't let kindness die. That's rare." She turned and looked into his eyes. A long look, without words, that held everything: gratitude, pain, love, trust. "And if life destroys everything again?" she whispered. He shook his head. "Then we'll build it all again. Together." The spring that year came early. The courtyards were filled with the scent of blooming bird cherry. The sun gently warmed the earth. On Sunday, Pavel took everyone to his friend's dacha. On the way, the children sang songs, arguing over who was louder, and Marina sat next to him, looking out the window. When the car left the city, she took a deep breath of the air and smiled, truly, for the first time in a long while. At the dacha, they were met by a spacious garden where everything was blooming and buzzing with life. Pavel grilled shashlik. The children ran barefoot in the grass, and Marina sat in a hammock, watching them. Pavel came over and handed her a cup of tea. "You know, I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe we should buy a house somewhere out here, so the kids have a place of their own." She looked at him, surprised. "A house? But that's expensive." "Everything can be built if you have someone to build it for," he replied. He fell silent, took a small box from his pocket, and opened it. Inside was a delicate silver ring with a tiny stone. "Marina, I hesitated for a long time because I was afraid of losing what we have. But now I know for sure I don't want to be just a family friend anymore. I want to be your husband and their father. Not just in words, but for real." Tears glistened in Marina's eyes. She covered her mouth with her hand, unable to utter a word. "You really mean it?" she whispered. "Really?" He nodded. "Yes." Without pomp, without ceremony, simply forever. The children ran over at that moment, saw the ring, and started jumping for joy. "Mom, Dad is proposing to you! A real one!" Alenka shouted, unable to contain her delight. Marina laughed through her tears and nodded. "Yes, Pasha, yes." Pavel slipped the ring onto her finger. The children clapped their hands, and the wind rustled the bird cherry branches, showering them with white petals as if giving its blessing. A little more time passed. Now the house they had dreamed of stood on the outskirts of the city. A garden, vegetable patches, a hammock under an apple tree, an old dog they had adopted. In the mornings, Marina made breakfast, and Pavel left for work, kissing her on the forehead. Alenka hugged her old bear every morning and said to him, "Well, Mishutka, thank you once again. Without you, none of this would have happened." And in the evenings, the children fell asleep to the fairy tales Marina told by the fireplace. These fairy tales always had the same theme, about kind people, about miracles born from love and small deeds. But life is not without trials. One day, Pavel was in a serious car accident on the highway. The call from the hospital sounded like a thunderclap. Marina dropped everything and rushed there. The doctor said he was alive, but in critical condition. Her heart seemed to stop. She sat by his bed, holding his hand, whispering, "Just don't leave. We've only just begun to truly live." For several days, he was unconscious, and then he suddenly opened his eyes and smiled weakly. "I promised you, we'd get through everything together." Tears of relief streamed down her cheeks. For the first time in her life, she felt she wasn't alone and that love wasn't about beautiful words, but a force that could lift you even out of darkness. A month later, Pavel was already walking on his own. The children joyfully welcomed him home with a banner that read, "Our hero is back," and a multitude of hugs. Then Marina said, "You see, Pasha, goodness always returns." He laughed, "And sometimes it returns with a cast and crutches." They laughed together, but in their gazes now was a gratitude for life. The years went by. Alenka grew up, entered university to become a psychologist, to help people not lose hope, as she said. Danya became an engineer, like his father. Pavel and Marina grew old together, and every evening, as the sun set behind the apple tree, they sat on the bench holding hands. On the porch next to them stood the same bear, slightly faded but intact. Sometimes Marina would stroke it and whisper, "You were the beginning of it all. One spark of kindness that turned into a whole life." Pavel would nod and say, "So it was worth stopping by that window display after all." And Marina would quietly reply, "It was worth it. Kindness is never in vain. It just waits for its hour to change someone's destiny." And the wind, as if agreeing with them, rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of the bird cherry from that very day when it all began.